I took revenge on a cheating ex, and I went overboard. So recently, I found out my ex had a flirtatious relationship at work with one of her managers. Sexual dirty talking, during work sexual compliments, photo sharing, and even plans to hang out. I told her to cut it off, block him. But less than a day later, she texted him again. What's worse, she said me catching her was hilarious. She mocked me, made me look like a doormat, like a joke. I couldn't take it. I posted screenshots of everything on her Instagram, her Snapchat. I sent them to that guy, her boss, even her mother. While I was helping her move, she was sexting this man. The guy replied instantly. Her boss and mother, silent. She called to apologize, but it was too late. I told her what I did, and I told her to screw herself. Update. Her boss saw my message, no reply, but now she knows. Update 2. She still has her job. She's doing damage control. Update 3. She texted me again, and it got ugly. Name-calling, insults. I realized the damage was done. I need therapy. I need to work on myself. She never wanted me. She never deserved me. Update 4. I even contacted the owner, but he said he can't get involved since it happened outside the restaurant, even though it was on the clock. At-will employment means she still keeps her job. Uncomfortable? Yes. Fired? Number. Final update. I found out the guy she cheated with was a single father. I showed his ex all the screenshots. She already knew he was unfaithful. Turns out, he was cheating with multiple women at that same restaurant. And my ex? For someone who hated her dad for cheating on her mom, she sure loved playing the role of the other woman. It hurts, but I'm done. I'll move on. The promotion that never came. Hopeful. I had been working at the same company for over 3 years. I wasn't just doing my job, I was giving everything I had. I stayed late when nobody else wanted to. I picked up tasks that weren't mine. I covered for co-workers who didn't finish their projects. Deep down, I believed that all this extra effort would eventually pay off. Relieved. One afternoon, my boss pulled me aside after a meeting. He smiled and said, "You've been doing great. Next year, I'll raise your salary to $50,000. For me, that was huge. It wasn't just about money. It was recognition. Finally, someone had noticed. Determined. That single promise lit a fire in me. I doubled down on my work ethic. I came in early, stayed late, volunteered for every difficult assignment. Every time I felt tired, I reminded myself, this will all be worth it, he promised. But then the months started passing. 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. Nothing. Every time I cautiously brought up the raise, he'd brush it off with the same fake smile. Don't worry, soon. A whole year went by, and still nothing. Then I found out the truth. My co-workers were already getting their raises. The boss had been telling other managers that I didn't want extra responsibility, that I wasn't ready for a higher salary. He lied. Lied to protect himself, while I was left looking like a fool. Sad. Bitter. I felt crushed. Betrayed. All those long nights and weekends, and in the end, I was just being used. Smiling, proud. But then came the turning point. Another company reached out. They offered me a position with a higher salary than my boss had ever promised. I didn't hesitate. I accepted immediately. Before I left, I spent my last week carefully documenting every project, every achievement, every success I had brought to the company. On my final day, I sent that entire report directly to upper management, the people above my boss. They needed to know who had really been carrying the load. The roommate who took advantage. When I first moved into my college dorm, I was excited. It was supposed to be the beginning of my independence, a place where I could make friends, study, and grow. My assigned roommate seemed nice at first, quiet, polite, and easygoing. I thought I had gotten lucky. But over time, little things started to bother me. He would borrow my snacks without asking, leave his dirty clothes piled up in the corner, and constantly bring his friends over late at night. I let it slide because I didn't want to be that roommate who complains. Then one day, I realized my phone charger was missing. I looked everywhere, and when I confronted him, he laughed and said, "Oh, I've been using it for weeks." "You didn't notice?" He shrugged it off as if it were no big deal. The real breaking point came when I found out he had been using my laptop while I was at class. He had logged into my accounts, messed with my playlists, even downloaded games. And when I asked him why, he said, "You weren't using it anyway. What's the problem?" At that moment, I decided enough was enough. I gathered all the screenshots, messages, and even took pictures of him with my stuff. Then I went to the resident advisor and filed a formal complaint. Within a week, he was moved out of our dorm room. The administration had been keeping an eye on him already because other students had reported similar behavior. I wasn't the only one he had taken advantage of. At first, I felt guilty, like maybe I had overreacted. But then I realized, standing up for myself wasn't wrong. He crossed boundaries again and again, and I finally drew the line. In the end, I got a new roommate who respected my space. And I learned that sometimes you have to fight for your own peace of mind.
The wedding that almost didn't happen. Weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of your life. At least, that's what I always thought. My best friend was getting married, and I was honored to be part of the bridal party. Everything seemed perfect: the flowers, the venue, the dress. But behind the scenes, there was a storm brewing. A few weeks before the wedding, I overheard the groom talking with his friends. He laughed and bragged about one last fling with someone he met at a bar. At first, I thought I had misheard. But then I saw the texts. He had actually been cheating on my best friend just days before their big day. My heart sank. I didn't want to destroy her wedding, but how could I let her marry someone like that? I stayed quiet at first, hoping it was just a stupid mistake he would regret. But the guilt ate away at me. On the night of the rehearsal dinner, I finally pulled her aside. I showed her the screenshots. Minus one, she broke down in tears, her whole world crumbling in front of her. She said she couldn't go through with it. The next day, instead of a wedding, there was chaos. Families screaming, the groom begging for forgiveness, guests shocked and confused. Some called me a hero for speaking up. Others accused me of ruining everything. But here's the truth: I didn't ruin her wedding. He did. He made the choice to betray her, and I just exposed it. Months later, she thanked me. She told me it was the hardest thing she had ever gone through, but it saved her from a lifetime of pain. She's happier now, focusing on herself, and one day she'll find someone who truly deserves her. That wedding almost didn't happen, and honestly, I'm glad it didn't. The teacher who played favorites back in high school. I had a teacher who everyone thought was the nicest person in the world. On the surface, he was friendly, supportive, and always smiling. But if you weren't one of his favorites, you quickly learned the truth. He had a group of students he clearly liked more: the athletes, the popular kids, the ones who could make him look good. They always got better grades, no matter how sloppy their work was. Meanwhile, the rest of us had to fight for every single point. I remember spending nights working on essays, pouring my heart into them, only to get a C with little to no feedback. Then, one of his favorite students would turn in something half done, and magically, it was an A. I tried to ignore it until it started affecting my GPA. My college applications depended on it, and I wasn't going to let his favoritism drag me down. So I started keeping records, copies of my assignments, grading rubrics, even photos of the work he gave top marks to. When I had enough evidence, I took it straight to the principal. At first, she didn't believe me. He was too well-liked, too charming. But once I laid everything out, she couldn't ignore it. The differences in grading were undeniable. The school launched an investigation, and while they didn't fire him, he was put on probation and had to follow stricter grading guidelines. Students noticed the shift almost immediately. Suddenly, he was handing out real feedback, grading fairly, and treating everyone the same. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was enough. My grades improved, and I knew I hadn't just helped myself, it helped every student who came after me. Sometimes standing up to authority feels impossible, but in the end, fairness matters. And I'm proud that I had the courage to fight for it. The boss who stole credit. I used to work at a mid-sized company where I was one of the youngest employees on the team. I wanted to prove myself, so I worked extra hours, stayed late, and took on projects no one else wanted. Eventually, I came up with a system that cut down our workload by almost half. I was proud of it. It was efficient, easy to use, and saved the company a lot of money. My coworkers loved it. They even joked that I should be promoted for making their lives easier. But when it came time to present the system to upper management, my boss stepped in. He told me, "Don't worry, I'll explain it for you." I didn't think much of it at first until I sat in the meeting and watched him take full credit for everything I had done. He used my words, my charts, even my examples, and everyone applauded him for being so innovative. I sat there, furious but powerless, as he smiled and accepted the praise. For weeks, I felt invisible. It made me question if hard work was even worth it. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the directors asked me to help him with a different project. As I walked him through my methods, he stopped me mid-sentence and said, "Wait, this sounds just like the system your boss presented. Did you create it?" That was my moment. I told him everything. I showed him the original files, the drafts, the timestamps, even the emails I had sent to my boss with the full plan attached. Within days, the truth spread. My boss was quietly moved to another department, stripped of authority. And me. I was promoted into his role. It felt like justice, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever had their hard work stolen. Sometimes karma takes a little push, but when it hits hard. The neighbor who went too far. When I first moved into my apartment, I was just grateful to have a place of my own. The complex seemed quiet, the rent was fair, and most of the neighbors kept to themselves. Except one. My downstairs neighbor complained about everything. If I walked across the floor in socks, she said it was too loud. If I did laundry at 7 p.m., she said it was unreasonable. She even knocked on my door once to tell me my TV volume was bothering her, even though I had headphones on. At first, I tried to be understanding. I tiptoed around my own apartment, avoided using the washing machine at night, and basically lived like a guest in my own home. But no matter what I did, she always found something new to complain about. The final straw came when I got a letter from management saying she had filed a noise complaint against me for slamming doors while leaving for work. The problem? I worked from home. I hadn't even left the apartment that day. That's when I started keeping records. I installed a noise monitoring app that tracks sound levels in my apartment, and I kept a daily log of when I was home and what I was doing. Within 2 weeks, I had proof. My apartment was quiet. The real noise was coming from her. I took everything to management. When they compared my logs to her complaints, it was obvious she was lying. Turns out, she had been trying to get me evicted so her friend could move into my unit. Management not only dismissed her complaints, but warned her that any further harassment would result in termination of her lease. After that, she avoided me completely. Living in peace again felt like freedom. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply proving the truth. The class project disaster group projects are supposed to teach teamwork. But in college, they usually teach you one thing: how to carry everyone else on your back. I got assigned to a group of 4. From day one, It was clear that I was the only one taking it seriously. 2 people barely showed up to meetings, and the third kept promising to do her part later. I ended up researching, writing, and putting together most of the presentation. The night before the deadline, I begged them to at least look over what I had done. They said they were too busy, one had a party, another was at work, and the third just didn't respond. I felt sick, knowing I was about to get the same grade as people who hadn't lifted a finger. But then I remembered something. Our professor had told us to submit an individual report explaining what we contributed. So I was honest. I wrote down every detail, who showed up, who didn't, and how much of the work I had to finish on my own. The day of the presentation, my group tried to act confident, reading off slides they had never even seen before. It was embarrassing. Afterward, the professor pulled me aside. He said he already knew the truth because I wasn't the only student who had reported the freeloaders. When the grades came out, I got an A. The rest of them, a big fat C. They were furious, of course, saying I betrayed the group. But I didn't feel guilty. Emotional the way I saw it, I didn't throw them under the bus. They parked themselves there. The family inheritance fight. Families are supposed to come together during hard times. But when my grandfather passed away, our family fell apart instead. He had worked his whole life to build a small fortune. Nothing extravagant, but enough to make sure his children and grandchildren would be comfortable. In his will, he divided everything fairly among his kids. At least, that was the plan. My uncle, the oldest son, decided he deserved more. He claimed he had sacrificed the most for the family, even though he barely visited my grandfather in his final years. He tried to pressure the lawyer into rewriting parts of the will, saying the rest of us wouldn't even notice. What hurt the most was watching my mom, who had been by my grandfather's side every single day, get pushed aside and treated like her efforts didn't matter. She didn't want to fight, but I couldn't just sit there and let my uncle rewrite history. I gathered every piece of evidence I could. Photos, hospital records, witness statements from neighbors, proving who had truly been there for my grandfather. When the court reviewed the case, it became painfully clear who was lying. In the end, the judge honored my grandfather's original will. Everything was divided exactly as he intended. My uncle didn't get his extra share. The victory was bittersweet. We kept what was fair, but our family bond was shattered. My uncle barely speaks to us now. But here's what I realized. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing people you thought would always be there. And while money can tear families apart, truth and integrity are worth more than any inheritance. The cheating study partner. Back in college, I was struggling in one of the hardest classes of my degree. So when the professor suggested pairing up with a study partner, I thought I got lucky. My partner seemed smart, organized, and motivated. At first, it felt like a good match. But as the weeks went by, I noticed something strange. During practice tests, he would always finish suspiciously fast and get nearly perfect scores. Meanwhile, I was sweating bullets, working through every problem step by step. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I really wasn't good enough. Maybe I was holding him back. But then one night, while studying at the library, I saw him slip a folded sheet of paper into his notebook. It was filled with answers from the actual test bank, something only the professor was supposed to have. I confronted him, and he just laughed. Angry, he said, "Relax, everyone cheats. You're stupid if you don't." Then he offered to share the test bank with me, as if he'd be grateful for it. I went home that night torn apart. If I stayed quiet, I could protect myself. But if I reported him, I risked getting dragged into the mess too. In the end, my conscience won. I gathered proof of photos of the test bank pages, screenshots of his messages bragging about it, even recordings of him admitting it. Then I anonymously sent it all to the professor. A week later, the professor announced that a student had been caught cheating. My partner failed the class and was reported to the academic board. I passed, not with a perfect grade, but with one I knew I earned. He never spoke to me again. And honestly, that was fine by me. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather struggle and succeed honestly than win by cheating. The office bully's downfall. Every workplace has that one person who thinks they're untouchable. At my office, it was a guy named Mark. He was loud, arrogant, and loved making other people feel small. He'd interrupt meetings just to belittle someone's idea. He'd gossip about coworkers behind their backs, then smile to their faces. He even made interns cry on their first week. Management never stepped in because on paper, he was one of the top performers. For a while, I just kept my head down. I didn't want to become his next target, but eventually, it was my turn. He started mocking me in front of others, taking credit for my work, and even sending rude emails late at night. I decided I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I started keeping a file, every nasty email, every stolen idea, every comment witnesses could back up. I didn't just collect my own experiences either. Quietly, I asked my coworkers if they had similar problems. Turns out, almost everyone had a story about Mark. The final straw came when he humiliated a junior employee during a presentation, making her cry in front of the entire team. That was it. I compiled everything into one detailed report and sent it directly to our and upper management. At first, there was silence. Weeks went by, and Mark acted like nothing had changed. But then, out of nowhere, he was gone. His desk cleared out, his nameplate removed. Management never announced what happened, but we all knew. The office atmosphere changed overnight. People were smiling again. Meetings were collaborative instead of hostile. It felt like we could finally breathe. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it's worth the wait. And watching the office bully finally fall, that was the sweetest victory of all.